Today's video is all about this, the Fuji X100VI. I've had this camera for about 5 days now. I've taken it with me to the World Indoor Athletics Championships and used it primarily as a B camera, capturing behind the scenes. And I've got some thoughts that I want to share with you about this versus its predecessors and what I think about it as a camera. So first of all, we got a bunch of new features, some of which are really noticeable and others not so much. The first one is obviously the higher megapixel count. I think this one is 42 megapixels now, which is really useful. I found it can be really good now when cropping in on images. Obviously with a fixed 23mm focal length or 35mm equivalent, you're not going to have that much flexibility to zoom. You're going to have to do quite a lot of work with your feet. But where you can't do that work, like when you're in a crowd at an athletics event, you can now crop a little bit just to give you a better composition. The last camera that I had was an X100F in this lineup, and I think that one is 20-something megapixels. You can definitely see a difference straight away when cropping in. You're able to resolve stuff in a much better detail. I think it's a really good feature and improvement on this model. I'm going to throw some examples on the screen of what I mean, but yeah, really pleased with the 42 megapixel sensor on this. The depth, detail, everything is really good. Next up, I wanted to talk about the autofocus. This was the biggest improvement in my eyes. I didn't have the X100V, so I can't comment there, but the autofocus on this is light years ahead of my X100F. You can see here on the back of the screen, the way that it locks onto someone's eyes or face is absolutely game-changing when compared to the X100F, and something that I think is pretty new in this lineup as well. I think that the autofocus is really quite on par with the Sony that I'm filming on now, or my Canon. It's a massive leap forward and bringing it into the 21st century, and something that I really appreciated when taking some behind-the-scenes footage, or when people were doing things like a high jump or a long jump, etc. I could lock on and I would know that it would be both fast and accurate, which are the two things I look for in autofocus system. So a big thumbs up there from Fujifilm. The next thing that I want to talk about is the sharpness of this lens. This is the new version of lens, which was on the X100V. They've carried across the same one, and it is excellent. I really enjoyed the sharpness and the crispness. I think it renders colors really well. I think particularly for portraits, I actually love it. It can give a good background defocus and some bokeh, so when taking portraits, it can look really good. And yeah, overall, big thumbs up on the lens sharpness, much improvement from my previous version. The biggest problem I had with my X100F was the metering. The metering was just completely off. It would overexpose just chronically every single time. I had to shoot stuff at like -2 EV on this little dial here, or manually adjust every single time. I'm really happy to say that the metering on this works exactly how you'd expect. It meters really well. I've had absolutely no problems with it. I normally shoot on aperture priority, so I put the aperture at f2 here, set an auto ISO, and then I could set a manual shutter speed if I wanted to capture something like some action at the athletics, and then just let the camera go to work and do its thing. I really like it. It's noticeably better than the X100F. Finally, this camera does have IBIS. I have to say it's not something that I instantly found myself recognizing that it had, or there wasn't a massive difference just when shooting every day. But what I will say is that I'm planning to make a video all about shooting video on this camera, and hopefully the IBIS makes it much more usable. One of my gripes with the X100F is that you could put it in video mode, but when you're trying to shoot everything, it was so shaky and janky. There was no IBIS on the sensor, and there was nothing in the lens to make sure that it's stabilized. So it literally looked like something that was filmed in, I don't know, 2008. It really wasn't a good experience all around. So I'm excited to try out the IBIS, but as of yet, I can't really comment on it. I did want to talk about some stuff that's actually not as good as I thought it was going to be. And the first one is all about build quality. Now, the build quality on this is just very different from the X100F, and that sounds a bit weird because it is. I can tell that it has a more premium finish, so when I touch it, feels different from the X100F. The corners and buttons are much more well-rounded, the dials click very nicely. This dial in particular, the one right here, to adjust both the ISO and shutter speed, works much better. They've got rid of the spring mechanism, which was really starting to go on my X100F, so that's a big improvement. But something about the materials doesn't feel as nice. I don't know what it is, I haven't quite figured it out yet. Something about the X100F felt a lot more, I don't want to say chunky, because they're almost the same size, but just felt more solid. I don't know how or why, but I find it a little bit strange. I am a fan of the slightly lighter color material that's on the X100VI, but yeah, so far the build quality hasn't blown me away, which I was surprised by because a lot of people have told me that the X100V is where the build quality really took a step up, so I'm not sure about this one. I also feel like the screen mechanism is nice because it folds out now, which is great. but that does add an extra moving part to the camera, so we'll see how it fares when I've been using it for a couple of years. Another thing that I'm really not a fan of is the lack of buttons. They got rid of the D-pad on this model. It wasn't on the V either, it was on my F. So many fewer buttons on this model that I would like or that I'm used to. I had every single button mapped to a custom button on my X100F, and I could tell you what they are right now. On the D-pad, down was for the ND filter, which is something that I switch on and off all the time and I can no longer do without going into the menu and changing those settings. On the right was for film simulations, which was something that I changed quite frequently between classic chrome and others I enjoyed. On the left was white balance, when I needed to tweak something or I was going indoors or outdoors, etc., to make sure that my white balance was correct. And up was the drive mode, so if I wanted to go to still image to anything else, I could just hit that button. That was all like memorized, like muscle memory to me. So coming over to this and having none of those available is really frustrating. I think the ND one is the biggest one. That's one of the best features of this lineup of cameras, is being able to use f2 even when it's super sunny or super bright outside. That's no longer an option, which is really frustrating, I'm not gonna lie. I'm finding it really difficult to get the hang of that. I'm trying to set it up so I can press this top button here and it goes into like a little sub menu, and then you can select ND filter from there, which is quicker than going into the main menu, but it's still just a massive step backwards in my opinion. I'm not sure why Fujifilm did this, and it's really frustrating to use. And that's definitely taken some of the shine away from this camera for me when I'm using it in anger at an event. It's just slightly more clunky to do what I was hoping to do, and slightly less friendly to many photographers who are going to use this for proper stuff. So yeah, really annoying on that front. The final one is that this is a really modern, really fast, really blazing sharp camera, and honestly it's just not what I'm used to from this line. My F was a little bit slow, autofocus was a little bit clunky, buttons, you know, were great. I didn't have to go into menus, so it was a much more like tactile, film-like experience, and I think that's why I liked it so much. This feels like a modern digital camera. The face detection is so good. It's super quick at snapping pictures. It just sails through anything that you throw at it, which is great, but not what I was expecting. I'm gonna be honest with you. I knew it would be a little bit quicker, but this is night and day. This is like a completely different camera, a complete revolution when compared to my F, and not quite what I was expecting when I purchased it. I still do really like it. I think it's gonna be a really useful tool. I think it'll probably just take a little bit of getting used to on my part. But yeah, so far, feeling a little bit strange about that. To give you some insight, I actually put a purposely slow SD card in my X100F because I feel like it forces me to be more thoughtful about my shots. The whole point when I have this is that I want to really focus on the photography experience. I want to put it in my hand, think about the composition, and then snap a shot. I don't want it to be like firing away quick fire. And F was great because it was impossible to do that. It was just too slow. You couldn't fire away. You had to really think about everything. I did a slow SD card, which was perfect. I just set it up and really thought about my composition, used the excellent viewfinder. I had the whole thing streamlined and a nice workflow worked out in terms of what I was doing. With this, you know, someone who has never photographed anything in their life could pick this up and shoot a bunch of stuff and it would look great, which is what Fujifilm want, and I think they're trying to appeal to a larger market, but it's not kind of the camera that I thought it might be when it's going to be for, you know, a photography enthusiast, someone who like really lives and breathes this stuff, who likes getting a little bit nerdy, who wants to understand all those different functions and spend time on composition, etc. You know, you could use this as truly as a point and shoot, whereas the F would, I think you would struggle a bit if you knew nothing about photography. So I do have a conclusion on this, and it's kind of a funny one. If you buy this camera, you won't be disappointed. It's excellent in every measurable aspect. I do have some dislikes. I was quite vocal about them in this video, but I do think that they're just kinks that I'm going to get worked out. I think that this is a great camera for 99% of people. Most importantly, it's still a winning formula. The fixed focal length, the viewfinder is excellent, the experience of shooting with it is great, the tactile buttons. It still is, in my opinion, the most fun that you can get in a camera is in this line right now. I think really what's happened is with the success of the X100V, it's kind of been popularized now. It's no longer a niche camera that some photographers will buy for a little bit of fun. It's going to be a camera that's going to hit the mainstream. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to buy it. It's a real success and moneymaker now for Fujifilm. It's going to be a much more appealing camera to the generation of photographers it appeals to on TikTok, etc., who expect all of these features as standard. They're not going to accept it not having good face detection autofocus. But if you're like me and you're a photography enthusiast and you're just looking for something that's a little bit fun, a little bit of a different shooting experience, something that will make you think when you take your photos, you can get 100% of the fun that you get from this camera by buying a slightly older version like the X100F, and you'll probably get 90% of the features too. Everything that I loved about the F almost everything, minus those custom buttons, is still available on this and is better. You know, it is a winning formula, it is a great camera, you're gonna have fun if you pick one up, and I'm gonna really enjoy continuing to use this, getting used to it and getting the best shots possible in kind of a low profile, fun kind of way, with an excellent fixed focal length and a banging sensor with amazing inbuilt color profiles. And if you pick one up, I'm sure that you'll be very satisfied. I've got a bunch of new videos coming out using this camera in different scenarios for different things, so make sure you subscribe to catch those, and I'll see you in the next one.